Joel Holman has been something of a mythical figure in the past. In order to have seen his career beginnings, you had to be following the lower echelons of the Swedish scene. I personally wasn't, but thankfully my small network of scouts includes a particularly dedicated Swede. During that time, Joel and his teammates created a huge amount of interest in the next generation of Swedish talent. This was a roster that featured some up-and-coming and perhaps a little interesting names like Chauzy and Plessen, but it really was Joel that took the main focus of everyone's attention. He then disappeared again, and he wouldn't be seen on an official roster for at least another year. There were, however, some sightings. Every now and then Joel would stand in for a random team. He would typically put up monstrous performances, pugging opponents out of the server before disappearing again without a trace. We finally got to see him with some consistency again when he joined the first official Monty roster. Joel did put up solid enough numbers, but the roles on this team weren't quite right, so he departed, with a huge offer looming on the horizon. When Godsent announced this roster, many rejoiced. Not only would Joel be seeing consistent playing time, he'd be doing so under the watchful eyes of one of Sweden's best tactical minds, Golden. It hasn't all been smooth sailing for Godsent, but in the past couple of months, this team and Joel himself have really started to figure some things out. I am King T, he is Joel, and this is Prospects. Let's begin with his mechanics. Joel is about as mechanically sound as a player can be. His first bullet is incredibly consistent, rarely missing the target at any range with any weapon. This includes the AWP, which he does pick up on a number of CT sites. With the rifles, Joel's bursting and spraying are absurdly good. It makes sense for his playstyle, as Joel is primarily a sprayer and a burster, rather than a headhunter. Thanks to his mastery of all rifles, it's incredibly rare to see a whiffed burst or a whiffed spray from the young Swedish phenom. Combine his first bullet, his spray consistency, and a crazy reaction time, and you have one of the most dangerous fraggers in all of Tier 2. These factors combine for a minimal time to kill, and it allows him to be an absolute multi-kill machine. While he is skilled with the rifles, Joel first made himself known through his AWPing proficiency. Thankfully, that skill hasn't been thrown away since becoming a primary rifler. He still gets to play it on the defensive end of the game, where he can have huge impact. On a map like Ancient, Joel spends a fair bit of time with the big green gun in his hands, and often really makes Draken look surplus to requirements. The AWP really seems to be Joel's confidence weapon, as once he gets rolling with it, there's nothing you can really do to stop him. Now let's talk about something that isn't immediately eye-popping for Joel. His pistols. We're still talking about the same mechanical monster, it's just a question of how it's being applied in pistol rounds. When given the chance to shine, Joel often does, but the biggest concern is Godsent's playstyle in these rounds. It's not that Joel doesn't know which end of a Glock shoots, it's just that he's playing like a lot of hard entry point man roles, and their CT setups on pistols look questionable at times. Aside from his abundance of mechanics, Joel brings some other interesting things to the table. On the defensive end, he's one of the most fluid and decisive rotators I've seen in a while. A lot of players get stuck on the wrong side of the map playing positions like A on Ancient or Apps on Inferno, but this isn't the case for Joel. Without getting too much into his playstyle, he quite naturally moves around the map, reacting to what the T side is taking and giving. Another weapon in Joel's war chest that comes into play in pretty much every round is his playmaking instinct. This is what informs his rotations, but more importantly his lurking. It's also part of what's made him such a dangerous, high volume fragger and high impact player no matter the team he's ended up on and no matter how little prep time he has to fit in with these players. On Godsent though, it's a common sight to see Joel find timings and push gaps in both the CT defenses, but T-side defaults too. These pushes and lurks are mostly based off his own feeling rather than a team strategy or a call. So often when he's not got his read quite locked in and he's not quite feeling it, you'll see him take a few stupid deaths. Overall, he has an excellent in-game IQ. He's permanently aware of flankers and lurks, often catching opponents out trying to catch him. He's also very solid in the clutch, using that big brain of his to optimize his fights and give himself the best possible chance of converting rounds. Finally, on occasions where he's found himself anchoring, we, the viewer, do get to see some more cerebral play as he dips and dives and ducks to delay the offense. Joel's CT play is something to behold. He is constantly popping off with absolutely ridiculous performances, on occasion coming into the halftime break with 20 plus kills, and he does this with far more frequency than any player really has the right to. The most impressive part of this is that he often is playing more solo positions on Godsend's best maps, and this comes with a lot of responsibility. Every poor decision, every cheap death loses a whole load of map control, so Joel has to play smart. With all this being said, all this context, he still plays incredibly aggressive and combative. Now, whether this be taking fights into A main on Ancient or pushing the apps repeatedly on Inferno, he has little tricks and gimmicks to make his quite aggressive, high impact play actually make sense. Let's begin by examining Joel's best map, Ancient. Here you can find great examples of all the key plays and moves that Joel makes on all his CT sides. Here's a classic Ancient round where Joel is contesting mid control. He throws a molly and a smoke down mid, forcing the T's into a more confined area. He then flashes for himself and starts brawling. He spams the smoke, knowing the likely angles the T's are going to be playing from. He may then choose to go and challenge towards lane, or more commonly, he then fades off to Donut. You see here there's an early aggression, something that could be high impact if it delivers, but he doesn't overplay his hand, and most of the time takes the safe option to allow himself to multi-frag later on. One of the more standard openings that Joel goes for is that he'll head into main and throw a deep nade. Having the better timing from spawn, this nade has potential to blow chunks out of an oncoming rush, or even a solo player getting into position. And this is of course typically followed by a hasty retreat back to the site, but if he has an AWP, he will occasionally sit and hold the A main just to catch out that lurker. There's the third option, and that's if Godsend are really desperate for an opening frag, Joel will actually take up residence in A main and make sure to hold that line so that any slow moving players just get one digged. An important part of being an A player on Ancient is making rapid and decisive rotations. Players who doubt themselves make weak rotators, but Joel has confidence up the wazoo. It's common sight to see him reinforcing Donut at a moment's notice, often creating a two-man setup with ZTR. Joel is absolutely lethal in these scenarios, with a reduced room for error, bringing out the very best in his mechanics. This is also the map where we really see that second AWP movement, that dancing around the map, come into full effect. Many second AWPs will sit and hold lines, but Joel is far more active, almost as active, if not more active, than his counterpart Draken. He'll take a number of different angles and peaks, really prioritizing getting multi-kills and impact over playing it safe. And even still, he rarely throws his life away. Let's take a look at some examples from other maps. Quite often on Inferno, Joel is actively looking to clear out apps and take fights into the second mid to make sure he can secure that information. This is a high risk, high reward maneuver, but it's one he can afford given his ability. Of course, an important detail is even if he doesn't find a frag, he still gathers a lot of information and also improves his flank timing, which is something he knows the value of. One of the most impactful examples of this came against Heat. After conceding banana control and being left with a lot of uncertainty around top middle, Joel takes the initiative to go and clear out the apartments. He's able to pick up a frag onto one, confirming the possibility of an A play, and then falls back to pit. Here he picks up another frag, and then goes down trying to delay the plant. Nuke is a map where Joel plays as part of a site duo, though this doesn't really cap his aggression. In fact, quite the opposite is true. With ZTR's assistance and some nifty tricks up his sleeve, he's still able to pester T-sides into submission. You really shouldn't be able to push Hut as often, as successfully as Joel does, and yet, here we are. One of the ways Joel sets up these pushes is with this HE that most sides like to throw, but he uses it as a conditioning tool. The nade technically also does a good job softening up rushes, but more importantly, it masks his movement as well as creating the illusion of a default site hold. Big fell victim to this early, mid and late round. Honestly, there was no time Joel couldn't push that Hut against Big. Their T-side default was sloppy as hell. Now that last detail is part of what makes Joel so hard to play against. Even though he takes a very specific group of fights over and over again, he varies up his timing constantly. Sometimes he does it early to challenge for space, other times he's retaking areas that could have been abandoned, and finally he also uses it to just expose flaws in T-sides. On the attacking side of the game, we're seeing the opposite side of the same coin. Joel is still taking a whole load of fights. Now, we're not seeing as aggressive a posture from Joel on the offense. Most of his duels are a product of slower lurks rather than quick, explosive movements. Let's begin with Anubis, where Joel has had some impressive T-sides on the few occasions Godsend have played it. He's responsible for the B side of the map, and over here he takes three primary approaches: containing, lurking, and challenging. This is true for all T-sides, but focusing in on Anubis, where he kind of blends that challenging and lurking playstyle into one, using this early flash and then peeking straight into the site. Now what makes this more of a lurk is that really, he's not there just to fight. He gets the flash, and if he's not spotted, he can just sit and linger by main, ready to activate whenever he's needed. Typically when Joel does challenge or does get forced into taking a fight is with a player behind default, though he does like to pick off the occasional ninja player too. This play doesn't net him a load of frags, but what it does importantly do is condition the offense to thinking he's there. All he has to do from here on in is use that flashbang and then play deep, containing the defense, and making sure if they ever go for aggression, he can surprise them with his positions. One map that really is key to Godsend's map pool is Inferno, and on this map, Joel's play is critical to them winning or losing rounds. Typically the way his rounds work is that he's using a bit of utility and then his presence to clear out the apartments, and then he starts digging around the edges looking for fights in combination with some sort of mid or long play. In these situations, he's looking for timings and more importantly angles to exploit on unsuspecting pit, graveyard and apartments players. He's able to find occasionally some little picks, some headshots, and this allows the final commitment to be done with even more conviction. Speaking of those commitments, Joel often finds a lot of impact as a late round player, as he is the apps lurker and therefore gets pit priority, and from there he can play around the cover, make plays, and find impact to win rounds for his side. Finally, let's take another trip into the jungle. Joel's responsibilities here are split between A and mid. We again look to the trinity of contain, lurk, challenge to understand his ancient approach. Firstly, when he's challenging, it's usually on the mid side, getting flashed out early. He likes to hold the angle from mid towards the cubby to make sure there's no peekers before getting flashed in through the fading smoke, and take that challenge onto any potential donut or mid players silly enough to face him. Here he's playing more of an entry role, usually followed up by Plopsky, and they try to get him into deep positions towards CT to then make plays later in the round. Let's take a look at a lurk round in detail. In this round against Cloud9, Joel is left alone on the A side of the map. He's initially here clearing A main, and he finds absolutely no one. In the meantime, a mid take is being contested, with both teams having heavy presence around there and around Jaguar. Knowing this leaves a maximum maybe one A player at most, Joel decides to try his luck and pushes into the site. He gets deep position to CT and is able to completely catch out the CT rotator. Coming back to the bomb site, Joel's actually able to contribute with more frags, killing the donut player and then even killing one of the retakers before finally dropping.
According to Genesis 1:27, on the sixth day, God created man in his own image. This is especially true for Joel. I've been following Joel for a while now, and I've been singing his praises liberally among the Counter-Strike scene, so I was ecstatic when he was unveiled as part of the current Godsend. I might finally be able to add yet more members to my cult of personality around this guy. However, his biggest chance yet highlighted not only his main strengths, but also his main flaw. Consistency. If you, dear viewer, were to click off this video right now and go to Joel's list of recent matches on HLTV, don't do it, you should stay on this video. You may scoff at the 1.14 average rating as being quite modest for a superstar, dubbed by some ducks as being this year's biggest prodigy. And you may notice periods of mostly red ratings, for example, February this year. This is unfortunately one of the main problems for Joel so far, where he will have very high peaks, but also very low lows, with very little room for middling performances. I would personally say this is expected and something that comes with being inexperienced on a new team. But it's very much a problem that has to be worked on. Part of this inconsistency may be related to Joel's aggressive CT sides, where constantly prodding holes and pushing positions based entirely on his own gut feeling eventually means that your opponents may get wise and expect you. And in this situation, peaking with no trade ability may spell the end for a round. Take this round versus Eternal Fire, for example, where close to the end of the CT side, Joel has already taken several fights like this one. The opponents start to anticipate these peaks, and in this instance, Zentaris finds a clean frag. Joel takes clean 1v1s like these regularly, and this confidence comes with high highs and low lows. Where in the latter case, it may be wiser to take a page out of the Book of James and stay alive to take a more favorable fight. This last part is especially worth considering when broadening our view to the Godsend team as a whole. A more detailed look through his stats will reveal just how dependent Godsend are on Joel's individual performance for winning their series. While this isn't inherently a flaw with Joel, but rather his team, as of right now, it does put Joel's flaws into a perspective where they become a lot more damaging than they otherwise need to be. While in a broader perspective, Godsend need to decrease their reliance on a single point of failure, in a narrower perspective, Joel could increase the amount of maps his team wins by improving his game-to-game consistency and occasionally pulling the brakes on his confidence. But honestly, this kid has something special, and I could see him winning majors at some point in the future. I mean, definitely before Zai.
A big thank you to Quacke for his little segment on Joel's few weaknesses. But let's get into the spicy stuff. Let's look at some grading. Joel is one of the most promising talents in the scene, and has shown off those talents against some of the biggest names. With that being said, he also has flurries and moments where he's able to put up really mediocre to weak showings as well. How do I, with his limited sample of top level maps, balance the insane peaks with the troughs? Here's how. I'm buying it. A player so young and with so little experience in really formal, organised teams has no right playing as smart as he does. Joel is a talented rifler and AWPer with a mind to match his wrists. For his current tier 1 level, it's hard to put him below a 4, even though his consistency is a concern. Joel's potential, however, for this series I feel is almost unmatched. To put it in context, the first time I watched a demo of his in its entirety, I genuinely contemplated just calling him a cheater. When he's on his game, everything he does is absolutely effortless, and really no one looks like they can outthink him or outfrag him. He's getting that 5, he deserves it, and hopefully we get to watch him blossom in the coming years, and probably in CS2. If you think I'm wrong, or if you have any disagreements, remember to leave a comment or respond to me on Twitter. We might as well play the algorithm while we're at it. As always, if you enjoyed, like and sub for more content, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.